Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So product management is a very interesting field and we have been talking to a lot of PMs. Today's special person, Aman. Aman is currently doing his masters in Carnegie Mellon University and recently got his product management internship at Trade Desk, which is one of the Fortune 100 companies. And it's going to be very interesting to talk to Aman because it's in US, so we can understand how the market is different compared to India. How is it easy to get a PM internship or PM job in US. Thanks a lot, Aman, for joining us. If you can give a quick introduction to audience, it would be helpful.
Sure. Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me. As you rightly mentioned, I'm currently pursuing my master's in Carnegie Mellon, and I'm doing it in the program called Information Systems Management, where I get to do a lot of technical and managerial courses. And prior to this, I was working as an AI research engineer for the longest time. I was at Intel before this, and then prior to that, I was doing a lot of research internships at different US and Indian universities. So transitioning from that to now a product manager has been quite a journey which will unfold.
Interesting, right? You were in AI and now into product management. I think there's
Yeah,
also a new role which is upcoming, which is known as AI product manager, right? Which is there
yeah,
in companies like Tesla and all. So the first question, like most of the people discover product management or they have come across this. How did you discover product management and how did you validate? Okay, this is the right
hmm,
opportunity for me,
yeah,
right? Because many people
yeah,
discover it, but they are still confused, right? Some people take it as an
yeah,
opportunity and then have I taken a wrong decision, right? So like, can I be
sure.
a developer itself? It was more cooler or it was more easy. So how
Hmm,
did you discover and how did you validate that it's the right
sure,
opportunity for you, right?
sure.
Because being at
Yeah.
Intel and then as in the working in AI, right, and taking a leap towards becoming a product manager, it's not an easy decision to make.
Sure. I was very well settled in a way in my career as an AI engineer because I had couple of papers as well. I had around 6 experiences before Intel, so I had a very good profile from that perspective. So it was always going to be risky, but I think what initially I'll talk about what drove me and then how did I validate, right? So initially, I think what I had seen that I think as a lot of people might feel that I had started feeling that my journey as an ML engineer was becoming very monotonous because ultimately it's the same cycle which you go through as an ML engineer. So you collect data set and then you effectively train your model and then you validate. So that had been going on through some years. And entrepreneurship was something which was the driving factor for me every time. And when I got the admit to this program at CMU, I found that it's a great opportunity to transition to a different role. And to be very honest, the only product manager I knew that time was you initially because we had met earlier and I had seen you on LinkedIn as well. So I think initially it was me to speak with a lot of product managers. So I think I had a conversation with you, and then I spoke to around 10 to 15 product managers at Intel itself before I left. So I think I spoke to a lot of product managers, tried to understand what do they do every day, what are the key responsibilities, what are the challenges they face in their lives, right? How is it different from engineering? Because a lot of those people had also transitioned from their engineering background, and I was basically in the same boat. So that's what I effectively did to validate, and that's how I got to know that it could be a great opportunity for me.
Interesting, right? So even I tell many of the people, right, if you have discovered, like talk to people and mainly understand the cons of the role too, right? Like most of the people just understand the
Yeah.
pros. For example, like how did you get into MS, right? If you can give a quick guide on like how did you crack the masters at CMU, right? Because it's a very
Right.
good institution in the US.
I think I had always been interested in AI. So initially, when I was trying to start my career as an AI research engineer, to be very honest, in India, in further education, there weren't very good institutions. Although we are still developing right now, but I think the state of the art research was happening a lot in the US, and I found Carnegie Mellon to be the best for ML and AI. And that's where I actually began thinking of it as a potential path to my journey. But that path took around 3 years because I did not have a very strong CGPA in my college. So having a low GPA, I had to compensate a lot by doing a lot of work experience like doing 6 research internships, couple of papers, working at Intel. So all that amounted me to effectively compete with people who were academically probably better off, and that's how I effectively came into CMU. And the usual steps like GRE, TOEFL, and SOP, all those I think happened for me. But it took me 3 attempts effectively. So I tried in 2020, 2021, 2022, and eventually I got some great universities and I chose CMU basically.
Perfect. So the next thing is, so let's say once you join CMU, you took the decision that you want to change your career into product management, right? It's not very straightforward, right? Like other career opportunities, you have lot of courses available on Udemy. Even for product
Yeah,
management nowadays you have, but the problem is it's not highly uniform and structured. So let's say one
yeah.
course might say product management is X, another course will say
Hmm.
product management is Y. So how did you learn product management? Did you take any course or did you learn from anyone? What was your key steps that you took while learning product?
Sure. So I think initially it was very difficult for me that I was enrolled in some sort of maybe a course, a fellowship, or somewhere basically where I could interact with the same mindset or the people who were also willing to go in the same career, right? Because I was from a very technical background, as we discussed. And I think I was considering, I think in India there were a lot of fellowships that time. And I'm sure they are right now as well. But when we discussed, and based on your suggestion and also some of my own research, I found that Next Leap was really effective, and it was also cost efficient as opposed to others. So I took a leap with that initially, and I started following them very strictly. So they had a 3 month course, and in that there were a lot of weekly live sessions, product tear downs, case studies, sessions with mentors where they would tell you about the interview process. So I actually made it a daily habit to not just do whatever is mentioned there, but go the extra mile by also reading a lot of articles about product management. And I think I'm sure you might know this YouTuber called Shravan Tiku, who is a very famous product manager himself, and he had this list of articles as well on his LinkedIn, which he posts a lot. Effectively, I changed my schedule and routine, and I started to get myself into a product manager's mindset. And understanding that at a very initial level from those people was important. But at the same time, I wanted to keep an eye on the market in US because most of those people were going to get prepared for jobs in India. But for me, it was a slightly different thing. So I think for me, it was slightly different. And I actually got to know about this product club at CMU, which I then decided to join as well. So there were a lot of these things effectively which I had started.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Aman, for explaining like how did you learn, right? Especially the key things key takeaways are key. One is you went the extra mile. Whatever they are teaching in the course, you learn extra. You learn from other articles, etc., which other learners don't do. And second thing is you are more focused on the goal itself. Like as you told, like these people will be competing for Indian market, but you are competing for the US market. So you had your goal very clear. So you had structured your path in such a way that you can crack a role in the US, right? And next question is in general, in product management specifically, learning product management versus cracking the interviews
Yeah,
are two different games together, right? So how
right.
did you learn to crack different interview rounds, and also how did you practice them?
Sure. Yeah, that's really valid because I think learning product management is very theoretical in nature. So, and it almost sometimes feel that maybe I will use this once I become a PM, maybe a lot of the frameworks and stuff like that. But cracking is, as you mentioned, is a different ballgame. And I started preparing for these interviews back in July itself last year. I got to know about this community from someone. I honestly don't remember who it was, but there was this community called Lewis Lin's community, who has the bestseller book called Decode and Conquer. And his Slack community has a lot of people who are very senior product managers at companies like Microsoft, Google, who are switching or who are also looking for jobs. So you can do mock interviews with them effectively. And that's where I started to do a lot of mock interviews. I got to know what kind of interviews there were. There are 4 to 5 different types of interviews. I remember meeting initially you as well and getting a high overview. And to further practice a lot, I used that platform a lot effectively. And it was very important that you keep on practicing without getting demotivated, because once you came to the US and you're applying, you're getting a lot of rejections also. What I saw that a lot of my other classmates, they were like that we will only start preparing once we get an interview shortlisted. But the problem with that is that you never know when you get an interview shortlist. And once you do get that, there is not simply enough time. So I think I consistently started doing a lot of practice back in my early, before coming to US. And I think that's what that year-long effort probably has helped me.
Perfect. I think the main important thing is being prepared, because currently in the job market, you don't know when you get a call, when you get
Yeah,
shortlisted. It can happen anytime. And once you get a call, it's like the opportunity has knocked your door, right? So now you have to grab it.
yeah,
And if
definitely.
you waste more time on practicing, then it would cause a problem. There are higher chances that the opportunity gets.
Sure.
But what are the other websites or any
Hmm.
YouTube channels you referred for
Hmm.
preparing for interviews specifically?
So I think before going to mock interviews, it's important that you at least get some idea of what the format would be or what kind of interview. So I think there are some channels like exponent.com, as you know, has a very high presence on YouTube. So they shoot a lot of mock interviews on YouTube and they post it there. Product School has some. So I think there are a lot of such channels which you can find on YouTube. And in that, there are a lot of different questions. So, for example, for product design, you can find a lot of questions like how to design an alarm clock for blind, etc., or behavioral as well. So, I think once you start viewing some of those videos, you can actually start getting a lot of idea on how you should frame your answers. And once you have that, then you can practice it in the real mock interviews.
Got it. I think the next thing is so learning product management, then practicing for interviews. So now, because of the job market, right, there's another new problem that comes up is discovering new opportunities and also standing out. Because if there's a PM opening, there are thousands of people applying, right? And there are higher
Yeah.
chances that you are rejected if you're on the bottom of the funnel. So how did you discover new opportunities? How did you make sure that you are getting shortlisted? So nowadays,
Yeah.
getting interview call itself is a problem. People are applying, but
Yeah.
they are not getting calls. If you don't get a call, you cannot
So
prove
true.
yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So this was the problem for me. I think for a very long period of time, because initially my resume was very technical in nature. I think in this funnel, I think the first step is resume shortlist, as you rightly mentioned. So a lot depends on your resume, and unfortunately or fortunately, today's resumes are being shortlisted a lot by ATS as well. And but there are a lot of companies which are manually also doing, but still, resume ultimately is a thing which you have to work on. So initially when I came in, I came that, okay, I have a very good resume. That's what I used to think. But when I started showing it to people, they started saying ki you have very technical terms. Your resume is very technical, like accuracy, precision, all those terms which are used in machine learning. I had them in my resume. So couple of things I did very well. I think because I realized that market is very bad, I obviously practiced for the mock interviews, but also I started networking pretty early. So I started networking from July or June onwards before coming, and I started making a list because in US there are a lot of companies, right? And it's very difficult to keep track of them. And eventually, if you need a referral, then you need to know you have a few go-to people, and that go-to person only appears if you have connected them initially. I met someone, and what I learned, he's a senior PM at Amazon, and what he told me that networking is like dating. So you do not tell them that you're interested in internship, but rather you tell them that you're interested in learning about their experience and then try to make a warm connection, basically. So that's what I used to do. I used to connect with a lot of people, and it took me, I think, around 2 to 3 months. So came here in August. By November, I had a very good resume. But from August to November, I had to go through at least 10 to 15 revision cycles of my resume. And I was doing a lot of 20-minute coffee chats with a lot of these PMs in US as well, so that they can review my resume, they can give me some feedback, and we can stay as warm connections. So eventually, I was not getting any interviews by then. But once I shifted my resume from a very product manager's perspective, so what I did was that each point I had as an ML engineer, I just flipped it And I thought, what would a PM think about it? Which metric as a PM would it move? Would it move adoption or would it move engagement, retention, and which area is it affecting in business? So once I started thinking as a PM and Resume eventually became a product, that's where I started getting a lot of interview calls basically.
I think three steps, right? One, resume shortlisting is very important, like preparing your resume, right? And also, if you are transitioning from one other function, you need to make sure that you reframe your resume in such a way that it fits the PM and considering resume as a product itself. And very important thing you told is networking. Networking is like dating, 100% agree. Because most people, they network, but after that, they don't have a
Yeah,
relationship. Like they
yeah,
saw someone, they say hello, they
yeah,
took their contact, but that's it. They forgot.
yeah,
So 100%, it's like dating. You need to
yeah.
keep the touch.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I actually have a couple of interesting stories regarding that. Right? So you mentioned an interesting point of maintaining a relationship, right? And so initially what happens is, let's say you send a message. People might not respond to you because they might be busy. It's not that they don't want to help, but they might not have seen the message or they might be too busy to respond. And let's say even if they respond, right, you don't leave that connection cold. So what I used to do, whatever the US holidays were, Thanksgiving, Christmas, I used to send them a small greetings message, right? And interestingly, I got a couple of interviews from there because when I used to send them greetings, then they used to remember, oh, okay, Aman had sent me this message earlier, and okay, you please send an email to this recruiter. Tell me I have told them, or maybe once I was lucky to find that the person itself was hiring manager, so he himself invited me for an interview, right? So I think these couple of things have happened. I think that's where I found the power of being patient also, because what happens sometimes that you become a bit you lose your patience and you become a bit frustrated and angry, right? That in future they might help me and I might be able to help them back sometime. I think that's where the connection forms, and that's where the magic has happened for me a few times, so I believe in that.
Yeah. I think this interesting thing I'm hearing for the first time, like sending greetings, wishes, and all. An important thing is patience, right? Some people send one time and they don't follow up. So
Yeah.
getting a job is your priority, not the other person's, right? Own priorities in life. And next thing is, okay, you'd have interviewed at multiple places, like before you getting the offer at Trade Desk. So what were the companies you had interviewed and what were the common rounds there?
So I've gotten 10 to 12 interview requests as a PM, and I think initially, so some of them were the bigger ones like Nvidia, Logitech, Trade Desk. And what pattern I was seeing, that there are normally 2 rounds as an intern in the US. I'm not sure if that is the same for India, but in the US there are 2 rounds. First round is the recruiter shortlist, right? So where effectively the recruiter comes on a call and they just try to understand if you fit their culture fit, and whether you're looking for all the basic requirements are matching. So it is supposed to be a very basic round, behavioral focused. Then the next round, the second round, is normally with the hiring manager. That round, so interestingly, most of the times I've noticed is behavioral, but in very good companies, they do tend to have design as well and analytics. But in majority of the companies, it's mostly behavioral focused. And the problem, what I've noticed, is that we tend to focus more on preparing for the more technical rounds like product design, analytics, execution. And we leave behind behavioral, which I feel is equally, if not more important, because most of the companies, at least for internships, they at least have one behavioral round, and some of them can be very tricky and they can literally throw you off the rails, because I experienced that at Nvidia as well. So I think that's where mock interviews also are pretty helpful.
Yeah, I think as you told, right, behavioral rounds are not very easy to crack also because you cannot even predict what the question would come
Exactly.
in a behavioral round, right? So it would
Yeah.
change according to the recruiter
Yeah.
also. Any scenario they might give, which is mostly unpredictable. So it's like on the spot, how you answer, how you think.
Exactly.
I think recently you had got an offer at Trade Desk, right? So if we can
Hmm.
deep dive into what are those exact rounds, what were asked, who was it with, and how did
Sure.
you crack that?
Sure. So if I go a bit before than Trade Desk also, so initially when I got as I mentioned, in November was the time when I had made a very good resume, and that led me to all these interviews. obviously you tweak your resume a lot. So you make a different version for each of your listing, considering they are a bigger company and you can spend that time. So I think that you do, and you network also a lot effectively, even after applying. So once I was doing that, what I found that initially I got only couple of interviews at Nvidia and this one more company here, and I was unfortunately rejected out of them, even though they did go well. And for around 2 months, almost 2 months, I did not get much interviews. So that period was pretty low for me. That's where I think that's where desperation to apply began, because you asked that how do you discover these job opportunities earlier, right? And I feel a good way
Yeah.
is that you have to be desperate enough to discover them, because there are a lot of portals on here, right? And I feel Glassdoor, I think to all the viewers, Glassdoor is probably the most comprehensive job search platform, at least for US market, you will ever find, which a lot of people did not know, even a lot of my batchmates. And I literally started applying a lot and networking a lot. It's a very interesting story. So I had applied for Trade Desk for software role as well as product role. So I had applied for both the roles, and got the my first mail came from a software internship perspective. They had shortlisted me for a software role, but I told them that, I have also applied for a product role. I want to go into that direction. Can you please, look at that? They gave a very basic response, whenever we'll go through product roles, we'll tell you, etc. And interestingly, after 2 to 3 weeks, I got a shortlist from Trade Desk for product role, and that was pretty interesting. And I feel somewhere this networking which I did after getting that software internship, that mail I dropped, that might have just helped them get my profile a bit more highlighted. Because just for some more interesting tidbits, when I asked the numbers to my recruiter, so she told there were 1,000 applicants before, like, who have applied. She spoke to only around 30 people. So only around 30 people were shortlisted from resume. So you can imagine the ratio is so low. And in this market, I think that just says my shortlist is probably the most important as well. Once I got there, then I was told that there was only one role available, and only one internship opening they have is for product management internship. So that honestly got me a bit disappointed, because when you have to hire one intern, right? As you know, in such competitive environments, there are a lot of other factors which can go at play, right? There can be maybe like there are always people better than you. So there were four interviews basically, right? So I got on the call, and the first round was behavioral, and interestingly, that was not a typical recruiter screen. There were some very interesting questions asked in that interview. I think one of them, I think, which I found interesting was that how do you explain technical terms to non-technical members and teams, so
Hmm.
that was a question. It was not a very regular question. It was a bit lesser asked question. And the second question which I felt was also very interesting was, what are your goals out of this internship? So the question was not that why do you want to join this company. The question was, what are the goals? So effectively, you have to think, that what are the goals after you get this internship, because there are 30, you're competing with 30 people at this stage, right? And interestingly, I got to know that less than 40% actually had gone to the second round effectively. And the next round was with a senior product manager at Trade Desk, and she just got promoted to director of product manager, and she was in the connected TVs team. So all the smart TVs ads which we get effectively, right? And that round was very interesting, because as you know, normal product design rounds are more like improve product X or design product X for Y or something like that, right? The question was which was asked was, that how do you design a product? So it was a different question. It was not a very straightforward question, but I think it was, how do you design a product? A bit vague question, right? And she told me that you have to give me specific examples. So that's where I think my Bosch. So I was working with a project at Bosch at CMU, and each step of vision, users, pain points. I think explaining each steps and without getting surprised was, I think, or and just keeping your cool was the key, because she only sent two people for the next round out of 1,000, if you can see. So that competing it was basically. Yeah.
Got it. I think the funnel is very interesting, right? First, you had 1,000 people, out of which I think only 30 got selected. The remaining
Yeah.
970 were rejected in resume. And again, another only 40%, that's around under 12 people go to the
Yeah.
next round. And after
Yeah.
that, only one gets selected after all the rounds get over.
So yeah, after that I had couple of more rounds basically, where
Hmm.
if I was competing with one more other guy, so there were two of us. So from 12 it was two. One of the things which he told me that the people who do not make or cross the line are the ones who make assumptions very early. So it's interesting that how you effectively make assumptions, and then the other person can't understand that you are probably not suited. And he told me that you were very data driven, and because maybe I asked a lot of clarifying questions and I went in depth, that's where probably I got the cut.
Got it. I think more on like these questions, right, which you cannot expect. I think product
Yeah.
management interviews is going to be more unpredictable in the
Yeah.
future, because nowadays everyone knows the rounds. I think
Yeah.
it has become more popular, so everyone knows product design, product strategy, RCA,
Exactly.
GTM. I think the next thing is what are the common mistakes that people who are
Hmm.
transitioning to product management, or let's say learning or preparing for PM role, should
Mm,
avoid.
yeah, so that's a good question because in my program, I think almost everyone wants to be a PM, right? Because it's one of those things, right, where you want, but very few get. So, for example, at CMU, I don't know how many of you guys know, but there is this program called Masters in Product Management. Okay, so
No.
that's a 12-month program, and interestingly, it has the average experience of that is 4 5 years, right? And you will not believe, but even people with 8 years of experience who come here and do this program, some of them are still struggling to find a job. Now, I'm not sure, I can't answer for them, but what are the mistakes which I made and what I saw other people? I think first was not understanding the world of product management well enough. So, for example, a lot of people they just want to transition to PM because they feel bored of their technical jobs, or they feel that they're missing something. So they try to jump the gun without even understanding what product management is. And I think as we were discussing my journey, I think a lot of you guys might have understood that for cracking this role, I had to become a product manager because my resume became my product, right? So I had to think from a product manager's perspective, how can I change my resume as to so that it gets a lot of hits. This reminded me of one more interesting thing. So I spoke to some recruiters because a lot of these recruiters, for example, companies like Nvidia, Trade Desk, a lot of these companies, they also manually go through a resume. And what I was told was that a decision on your resume is made on based on top 30% of your content, right? And it is made within 5 to 10 seconds. So I think this brings to me to my second point, which is your resume has to be very effective. I think because a lot of people, even I made that mistake, right? Where I was trying to explain them what I did, but I did not care what they expected. So it was interesting to understand what are the job description requirements. You see the market, there are product managers. So there are somewhere there is someone better than you, qualified than you, but you also have something unique, right? What my unique offering will be my experience in AI and software engineering, right? That is something which maybe other candidates may or may not have, but that is something which is unique to me. So understanding what is unique you offer, and I also suggest that you have some experience, because what I'm continuously seeing is people who are freshers, let's say who are just recently completed with their undergrad, they are trying to transition to product management, especially in this market in US. It's very difficult because market is difficult and they expect you to have some experience at least on the technical side. And it makes sense also, right? Unless and until you experience the technical side, you might not be able to become a very effective product manager, right? Especially now that AI and ChatGPT have come in. So I think the second mistake is definitely resume. Third mistake is preparing well ahead for interviews. So I think you will be shocked to know, but I think it was only me, and I honestly couldn't find anyone from such a large community of CMU people who were there on the Lewis Lin's Slack community, So it's very interesting to know that people who have such a high experience, if they are coming to US, a lot of them do not do mock interviews, and that leads them to not being able to convert a lot of times as well. Because as you rightly mentioned, the interviews are going to be unpredictable. They are going to be more demanding as well, right? Because they are going to require you to go unprecedented levels of, skills. For example, my interview, it required entrepreneurship at some extent because I was asked, how do you pitch a solution? How do you create a competitor to an existing solution, right? It required also having technical skills, and also finally it required the prioritization skills, which I mentioned. So it's important that you do a lot of mock interviews. I have done 105 mock interviews, and I have helped others with 105. So totally, I have done 210 mock. I have 210 mock interviews so far, and that has helped me a lot to just switch to that mindset. And interestingly, okay, so this is very interesting thing again, which I haven't said this anywhere. That once you start doing mock interviews, you will notice a very high peak or a high curve in your learning. Right. So first 10 interviews, you'll be like, oh, wow, I have improved a lot. The next 30 interviews you will do, you will notice that I haven't learned anything, because it will be in a way monotonous, because initially the amount of friction to change your mindset that has happened already. So that took 10 interviews. Now it is taking, now if you're doing 40, 50 interviews, you're feeling, yeah, I don't think I'm going anywhere. And that's where people drop off. But if you stick enough, and if you do those 100 or 80, 90, if you go the long distance, you can actually understand that even if a question which is not asked to you earlier, you can still connect so many dots from different experiences, whether it is behavioral, product design. So I feel when you do almost 100 interviews, you have at least so many points to connect, and you reduce your chances of failing in the interview. Because I personally failed a couple of interviews, right, initially. And although mostly they went well, still I think there were a few areas where I could have improved. And as I did more mock interviews, that's where I got to understand that how you effectively change and how do you do the storytelling. So that is the fourth thing I will say, mock interviews. The last fifth thing I will say is that prepare specifically for a company. For example, if you get an opportunity from Google, you have to do everything to understand what is interviewing you. You have to know that, right? How can you connect your past experience with what team wants and accordingly modify your star answers? So by star, if you do not know already, star is situation, task, action, and result, right? That is the format we use for behavioral questions. So I used to maintain this Excel sheet where I had a lot of questions and simultaneously the responses to all the four STAR. And I used to heavily change them. And I think the most efforts I did was for Trade Desk because I heavily changed my answers for each of the points which are mentioned in the job description. And I did a lot of research on what are they planning to release, what are some of the things they're expecting to be connected with my background. Why would they like to consider also my background and not someone else's, right? So when you dig deeper into a company, that's where I think the magic happens, and that's where you increase your probability of getting shortlisted as well after you go through that first round.
Yeah. I think one interesting thing I observed is the mock interviews. Like it's like math. The more problems you solve, the higher the efficiency of yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. I think thanks a lot. You had answered all the questions with examples and based on your experience and learning. So we can conclude the podcast. Thanks a lot, Aman, for your time. Thank you, everyone.